Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 647, Marketing Spoilers. September 27th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Leak a secret document about a new product and suddenly you have a PR bonanza. The tactic of leaking and publishing information has been a powerful tool in marketing for years, but now some consumers are crying foul. What's their concern? Tonight we'll discuss. Also incorporating 3D in advertising, ad blockers for the NSA, new guidance for in-game purchases in the UK, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder of the Idea Integration Company, showing up for his last day of Saul month. Mr. Saul Colt is here. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. It's always sad to be at the end of Saul month, but let's try to go out on a high note.
We will definitely try. Now, next we have the founder of the 6 Pixels Group, author, speaker, Mr. Mitch Joel. Hi, Mitch.
Hey, Bob, I'm thrilled to be here. I mean, honored to be chosen to be a part of the last episode of Saul Month. I mean, there's no honor higher. Thank you.
You're welcome. I thought of you first when I was trying to pick this panel. Now, also joining us is a partner at the CPG and retail consultancy, The Partnering Group. Ms. Liz Mare is here. Hi, Liz.
Hello. I am honored to be a part of the show tonight and humbled to understand about Saul's Month. Thanks for having me.
When did Saul month start? I think it's because I couldn't get anybody on the show that month, and suddenly Saul
2016, I think, is the date it started.
Probably. Glad that it's keeping going. And finally, he's a senior partner and co-lead of the global marketing practice at Profit, author, speaker, Mr. Mat Zucker. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back on. Hi, Saul.
Well, strategic leaks are simply a fact of life in the game industry. Pretty much all the tech industry depends on the tactic. You have big news about a new product and you allow that news to reach the market a few days early. But after the most recent announcements from Nintendo, all were released early. Fans got uniformly irate, calling it spoilers, believe that or not. Now, publishers felt the heat and the whole tactic has come under question suddenly, because consumers are actually thinking that hearing about the news before it's supposed to be released is now spoiler bait. Saul, calling it spoilers seems a little over the top, but is it true? Can we actually have spoilers in advertising now, and is it something we need to worry about?
No, you don't have to worry about it, one. And two, I'm not a gamer, so I'm a little confused by this story. The way I understand it, you've described it, a video game journalism site scooped an announcement that Nintendo was going to, make on their own at their own event. Hardcore fans got crazy upset, and Nintendo got a little butthurt because their reveal was lost. But here's my thoughts on this. One, isn't the job of journalism to report credible stories as they uncover them? How is this any different than the reports about, new iPhone features before an Apple event that, and Apple events at this point are almost not even news anymore. They're almost irrelevant. But how is this also different than a Super Bowl ad getting released on YouTube a week before the game? I'm really stuck on the word spoiler because game announcements aren't spoilers. Those are things that happen in the real world, and your knowledge of them is not spoiling anything. Like, this isn't fiction, this is real life. And I'm sorry that the reveal was ruined, but this Nintendo event is the same as an Apple one, where they basically say, hey, everybody, we're announcing this today, and surprise, you can now give us money. And at the other reason I have a problem with the use of the word spoiler is that hearing that the experience of this was ruined doesn't track with me logically, since there are people on YouTube making millions of dollars by literally just having people watch them ruin a game because they're sitting and watching them play the game and get to levels that they couldn't get to, and ultimately spoiling the game for themselves.
Well, let's take a step back and
I got one more thing.
Okay, you go for it.
And then Mitch can make me look stupid. But University of California, San Diego psychology professor Nicholas Christenfeld. See, I do a tiny bit of research for the show.
It's your last day of the month. I understand.
he did a study that showed that spoilers don't actually ruin a story. They make you enjoy it even more because it forces you to, if you know the ending, it forces you to actually pay more attention to the middle and all the little breadcrumbs that get you there. So again, forget spoiler of anything. This is just news.
Let me play devil's advocate for just a second, and let me position this as these announcements have become more than news. They've become entertainment in and of themselves. So isn't it conceivable that, telling people the end, ruining the surprise of this entertainment event that they've been looking forward to is a spoiler? I mean, is that...
Well, but did anybody see the trailer for Fast 9? We all found out that Han was still alive. That would have been the only redeeming thing in a horrible movie. Like people give away like everything. That's how you get people to give you money.
Yeah, and I wonder too if even the word spoiler makes sense here. It's just even leak is a word I'm not sure of. You're dealing in a different type of world when it's social and digital, where influencers and new online publications are not abiding by the same rules and strategies that you had between traditional journalists and media empires. I can't tell you how many emails I get every day that ask me to embargo something. And I'm like, I wouldn't be sending me anything with the word embargo on it because it's just not what I'm doing. I'm not following or abiding by any of the rules set out by any of the traditional media standards. I also think that leaks have become somewhat of a marketing PR strategy. You're in fact getting double, triple, quadruple whammy hits in the media as the buildup to the launch happens.
That was my other comment. I mean, that was my other thing about this. I mean, it's like Nintendo playing like this is behind their back and they're just as offended as the fans is just covering their butts because there's no way that they got this information without Nintendo leaking it.
Yeah, and you're moving towards this place where you have, I believe, these divergent audiences. Audience one is, I want to know every little detail before anyone else and follow this. And I don't really care that by the time it's released, I know the components of it. Those are your, hardened super fans that you want to engage and connect with. And on the right, you have people who might say, I don't want to know the gender of my baby before it comes out. And I'm going to avoid all sorts of examinations, media, whatever it might be, that might divulge ultimately the surprise. And when you think about it from the perspective that Saul's bringing it, I really do think that one is we have a spoiler culture. I mean, we have hashtag spoiler alert as a trending topic every day in the media. But when it comes to products and product launches, I'm of the court that this is a double, triple, multiple whammy media hit as we build up to it. Vast majority of people won't pay attention to it. The real uber nerds, the real early adopters might. And we all ride off into the distance happy that there's buzz.
And also too. I think we want our journalists to be journalists and not just print press releases when they're told to and what the content is. I think we want people to report on what's going to happen, whether it's financial services or healthcare or packaged goods. I think we want to know what's coming. We want to know when the new EV, stations will be ready. We don't want to wait till a company's just ready to tell us.
And also, it's not going to stop people from buying the games. Like, they're not going to go, oh, my God, I wish you hadn't told me this game was available. Now I'm not going to buy it. Like, it isn't going to affect. So, again, nobody was hurt in the making of this whatever.
Spoilers are the new ads.
Liz, what's your take on this whole thing? I mean, it's like, do you feel like leaking information to the press ahead of time is a valuable tactic that needs to be preserved, or do we respect the consumers in this particular instance and say this is a spoiler and we need to worry about it?
I mean, I look at this similar to the point on audience divergence is whose opinion really matter, right? But the degree to which the quote unquote scandalous leak, makes or breaks your brand or your business or your launch is not, I don't think, a decision for the owner of the brand to make as much as it is how does it impact the buying patterns of the consumers that you care most about. So I think that's where I don't have a clear right or wrong answer in relation to this. I think my take was, the directs and the typical way that Nintendo goes to market with these launches, is more in seeking to have that personal relationship with some of these fans. And, I guess it just depends on what that fan base means to the business today and the growth tomorrow. And, how much does Nintendo care about keeping that, sacred community and that relationship versus needing appeal so that people buy the games. And it comes down to audience entanglement, in my opinion. So it's what opinion matters more.
That's a great question, though, Liz is asking. Do we know if a leak has ever really hurt a brand or business? And I guess there might be some correlation between the hype around maybe an Apple product and then the market perhaps responding prior to it being officially launched. But even then, there must be a correction at official launch, whether it's up or down. But I'd be curious to know if a leak or a spoiler alert has ever really ruined any kind of launch in a damaging commercial way.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, none of us are PR representatives or have PR backgrounds, as far as I know. I mean,
I got a little bit. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, I mean, what I always hear from PR professionals is that if you blow the embargo date, then you lose media cycle. You don't get all that attention on that one day. You spread out the attention and you don't get as much bang for your buck. So I understand, but I'm not sure if that's true anymore.
Well, I'm gonna argue that point. The media cycle right now, or the news cycle, is so small that a leak and then your actual announcement could actually give you longevity, because like this thing would have been like a 24, 36 hour story if they had just done the reveal the proper way. But now they have the story of the reveal, the leak, and whatever, the pushback was. Like I think this would have been a fan-based story in and out, and whoever was going to buy the game would have bought the game. And now they actually have like a marketing story and a news story where, so like it may feel like some people got burned here, but this probably was secretly the best thing that could ever happen. Like we just don't talk about news anymore. Like that.
OMG, they're getting buzz and media off of the spoiler story.
Oh my gosh, it's terrible. Hey, Matt, are certain industries more susceptible to this kind of backlash? And if so, who would they be? I mean, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, certain industries are really protected. So if it's like healthcare, financial services, highly regulated, you let something out before it's ready, you're in deep trouble. You could really throw the product, approvals off and things like that too. There's also a competitive intelligence thing. Like if you're going to do something, so this may be not in a game, it could be a feature rather than a piece of the storyline. But if you're going to release a specific feature in consumer electronics or something, you're giving away a competitive advantage. But if you think about it, a lot of the differentiation is around the storyline now, or the brand, or the brand's point of view, or the experience around it, and less the product itself. So I think it's far less of a threat than it used to be.
Is there an argument, and this is for the whole panel, I mean, is there an argument to be made that somehow having the consumers or having the leak happen ahead of time is more powerful than, having that one media day, simply because the way media works now? I mean, we have the viral nature of media and the spreading of it. I mean, wouldn't it be wiser to leak this to a whole bunch of bloggers and influencers ahead of time, have them spread the word leading up to your big day, where it hits the mainstream media and goes to the rest of the population? I mean, wouldn't that be a smarter strategy going forward?
I mean, I guess it depends on how people are really taking the product. In the sense of what you're seeing here from video games, is it all positive would be the question you're looking at. But I was, half joking when I said spoilers are like ads now. And, if you look at even influencers, influencers act as advertising conduits, almost saying better things than you would ever be able to say as an independent brand. So the merits of it ring true. The question is, are they saying good or bad things? And if they're saying bad things and this becomes a want launch, that's problematic. Not that you wouldn't have the want maybe a week after the launch.
Well, that's the point.
Perhaps getting ahead of it is the problem.
I mean, in the end...
I'll also take a different stance on this. The Nintendo reveal would have been a very inside baseball crowd. And there's two types of people that buy video games. There's people who consume them for themselves, and then there's like a more mass general audience that's buying them for their kids or, gifting them or whatever. And I don't know if the inside baseball announcement would have made it to like the PTA meeting or whatever. But now they have a much wider breadth of announcement based on these sort of things. So, it's wonderful. You want to connect with your community. It's exactly what you should do. But there's also like several groups of people that you have to hit with an announcement like this, because ultimately their goal is to move product and be profitable.
I thought you would release it like in certain places rather than just a public leak. You would put it into Reddit. You'd put it into certain communities. I mean, then you get momentum. Maybe it pushes the algorithm. Maybe it helps search. Maybe you get some email addresses and build your database. It doesn't have to be like a blast type of leak, because then you're really engaging the people that matter, and it's like a treat,
Well, in other forward-thinking, new thinking for advertising news this week, we all know virtual advertising is on the horizon, but is the concept of 3D advertising already a must-have in the integrated funnel? No, I'm not talking about wearing funny glasses to see ads. 3D TV is dead. We're all over that part of our lives. But incorporating the ability to fly through environments and dynamically view products from all sides is rapidly advancing into the ad space right now. So, Liz, I'm not even going to bother asking if this is a coming trend for advertising, but I will ask the simple question, what is the pace of this right now, and how soon can we expect 3D elements to be an integral part of every ad campaign going forward? I mean, you go shopping online, you're able to turn that product every which way to see it anymore.
Right.
Or getting things from every angle, and incorporating 3D makes that so much more elegant. Are we going to see this everywhere soon?
Yeah, I love this question because it's such a simple, it sounds so simple, right? 3D into advertising, but I think the thing is that as we look at it as a must-have in the integrated funnel, I have to laugh, because from where I sit, I just think there are so many, marketers that are struggling with integrating their funnel in the first place. So I don't want to take us off topic here, but
no, go for it, because that's the whole purpose of this.
I have a lot to say about this one. And I think it's just first and foremost, it's about marketers needing to prioritize getting to a whole new level of foundational integration that stems from the media fragmentation that everybody's dealing with, and the struggle to build a distinct, engaging brand that, consumers are going to buy. And I think what I think about this offering is ultimately, sure, try it. Sure. It is an enablement that bridges this whole phygital environment. And it's so funny because as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that last evening I was looking at rugs on Amazon, and I was using the placement of the product, in the room for which I was looking at a rug.
I know, I love that feature. I did that for office chairs just a few weeks ago.
Right. I guess my thing is that ultimately any action that you're taking in marketing is going to work harder if you understand what that media consumption is about in terms of engagement, and that it is in fact an active one in this sense, not a passive one. And I think what I see is I still think a lot of brands are struggling with just these concepts in general, in terms of where is my media, dollars placed? How are my consumers actually engaging with my product, and what is ultimately driving my performance? So back to your question, the evolution of 3D into advertising means to consumer engagement and experience. It's ultimately going to be focused on the role of the brand in the category and what that plays in the end user and the end consumer's life. So if it is very highly relevant when you're looking at a furniture purchase, because that phygital environment is quite frankly a lot easier to plug and place than going and bringing your measuring tape in the store, and maybe in some instances, great. But that requires a foundational content strategy and a media strategy that drives awareness and trial and is ultimately valuable for your consumers that want to engage in the first place. And so to kind of bring it home, the expectation for 3D being integral across the entire funnel means, to me, that the brand or the marketers that we're speaking to have mastered the basics, right? Number one, they understand the context for which the message appears within the journey and the shopper's mindset at that point in time, right? Is the shopper actively engaging? Are they about to buy? Are they browsing, or are they just passively retaining the message, and how much do they even care to engage, right, in this way? Secondly, emphasizing sorry, I just have 2 more points to make. Emphasizing that the consumer's buying decision is to understand what elements are creatively necessary to dimensionalize, right? Again, warranting your target consumer as an active engager versus a passive participant. And then I think lastly, determining how to measure all the fancy, kind of bougie effects. Like, what is the value of this experience in driving brand distinction and conversion? What is it getting you? And where is it creating a win for your consumer and for your brand? So anyway, that's just, I guess, a little bit of my initial thoughts on, how we're thinking about this as just in general as to all the things a marketer can do in the toolbox. But I think it is going to remain critical because, as we know, I think I read the quote somewhere that 40% of all consumer spending is going to be digital by 2026. 15% will be frictionless. And who knows how those stats have changed with the emergence of COVID. But again, it's what is this doing for you?
I totally agree. I totally agree with this. I mean, I especially love your point about, mastering the basics, that so many brands have not mastered the basics. It still boggles my mind that you run across brands almost every day that have no real depth in the digital realm. They're still hiring a chief digital officer to make themselves digital and go from the analog world. It's just so mind-bending to think that that's still an issue. Mitch, you were going to say something.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised by the article or the conversation around this, only because it's timed almost on a cue to what Zuckerberg was talking about with the metaverse. So he creates this grand vision of how we're all going to interact in these Web 3.0 3D virtualizations. And of course, we need a reaction from media advertising. And so we have this article that comes out and talks about what's going to happen when ads are part of this virtualized metaverse and how it connects and what does that mean. And, my only reaction isn't that, brands don't know the basics. I think there are many new brands that have come out and have completely foregone the basics for really irreverent different types of strategies, whether you want to lump it into growth hacking or you want to just talk about how they're solely focused on really technical direct response strategies versus any form of real brand building or storytelling. And I'm not going to be handing out tickets for whether or not they should or shouldn't be fined for the fact that they don't know their basics, because it works for some, it doesn't work for others. But we would be really remiss if we just didn't think about it in the grander scheme of what is going to happen in this quote unquote metaverse, in this virtualization. And I think if brands wanted to do anything savvy, it wouldn't be about allocating an experimental budget like they used to do on digital to this component. It's more about thinking, where can I be maybe the shovels instead of trying to find the gold? How do you figure out what media spend might look like there? How do you figure out what creative development and deployment might be? And then within that, you might, as an ad agency or consultant, find something really interesting, niche, and unique that might make you what would be now one of the first email marketers, one of the first SEOs. I mean, we can't step away from the fact that MailChimp was sold for over $12 billion very recently. And perhaps the next agency consultancy that moves into this space of virtualization metaverse will be the next MailChimp.
Yeah, but I agree 100% with you, but I'm also going to roll my eyes a little bit, because what you're saying is exactly correct. But how many times have we seen these people who go all in? Man, there were people foaming at the mouth over Clubhouse. There were people,
that's a platform. We're not talking about, this isn't a platform. This is going to be the OS.
Mm-hmm. I just think that, every time there's something new, that there are so many of these consultants that rebrand themselves without really knowing where the new world is. They happen to be the first ones there, and it's I don't know, different topic. Just that's just my own personal gripe. I agree in principle, but man, is it annoying when you see the same 12 people who every 9 months rebrand themselves for whatever's hot, and it's gross.
For me,
so Saul Colt, metaverse consultant. Okay, we hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, I see 3D marketing exploding on inbound channels. So I see it on a lot of retail sites and healthcare sites. A lot of inbound content rather than outbound campaigns, which is a shame because more than 10 years ago, Airwalk did that really cool, launching a sneaker in a 3D and interactive environment out at the beach and stuff, and it was pretty cool. But I think maybe that hasn't happened yet. People just started using QR codes during COVID, to order from restaurants, and now they're holding them up their TVs after waiting for 25 years. So maybe 3D is just emerging in outbound, but it seems to have a good velocity on inbound channels.
Well, you bring up QR codes, and that's always an interesting dynamic because the technology was there, but the apps weren't. And so it was such a problem because you had to incorporate it into your app, or you somehow had to have some third-party app that could read a QR code before it would even work. Right. And now suddenly, without any fanfare and without any news, we ended up with QR codes being able to be read by your phone as soon as you hold it up. You don't need to do anything. And I'll tell you, even the most knowledgeable QR code people, and I'm talking about a classroom full of Chinese nationals, not a single one of them knew about that feature. I brought it to their attention, and they were blown away that this was possible. And this was only 2 years ago. There's so much about the education of 3D type technologies and environments and interactive type tools that needs to be done, and we're just so far behind in educating the population. I'm wondering, no matter how cool the technology is, Matt, how do we get past that? How do we educate the population about what these tools are, how they can be used? Sure, it's cool that Amazon has this 3D virtualized environment to show your chair in your living room, but I'm sure, I don't know the stats on it, but I'm sure most people have never played with that feature because it's too intimidating.
Yeah, well, there was the first wave of adopters, and now you've got the people who were forced to go online, and they are, at least the clients I talked to in CPG, say that now they're serving people that are used to shopping in the store. So they're seeing things like that accelerate now because all of us first wave people were not spinning the chair around. We could care less, right? But the other people that are used to being in a store that can't be are now futzing with that technology because they expect it. So it's this new mass wave that's actually futzing with the technology.
Liz, I have one follow-up question for you. When this conversation, the whole conversation so far has been focused mainly on digital environments and how we apply 3D in the digital space, or at least traditional digital spaces like web browsers and things in your phone, etc. But is there a coming world where, the technology advances to the point where your mailers are more 3D, that you have more 3D experiences in store, in retail pop-ups, in billboards. I mean, are we on the verge of seeing that come to life very, very soon? And will it be effective?
Well, I mean, my crystal ball is kind of cloudy right now, but I will tell
I know.
you
I put the tough question on you.
no, I mean, it's N of one, right? So take it or leave it. But in my opinion, okay, so something like an in-store mailer, is it cool? Maybe. Yeah, sure. Is it effective? Who knows? Did it cost a lot? Probably. It comes down to the value, for the extent of the customization and the technology, because to your point on, if the consumer doesn't know how to use it, and if it is offering no utility and it's just something that's flashy, then it could very well be really cool, but not effective. I would say, though, to the point on in-store, I do see a role for a far more engaging retail experience just in general. And I think that stems from obviously the shift to online commerce and the fact that so many of these stores, and you see it in the malls, right? Like they're all dying. And it's not that it's going to be necessarily like that forever. But I think the winners of the in-store experience will focus on just that. It's an experience. It's not a store for inventory. It's experiential, it's inspirational, and it's highly engaging. But again, that comes from what is value for the consumer, what's going to pay off for the business, and what is the level of engagement and interaction that your consumers and your shoppers are looking for on this journey? So that's what my crystal ball says.
I think there's another level to this, though, and it's an important one to think about, because we are in a world where ultimately brands are also doing a certain level of corporate development and positioning, and there's a value in that. And there's definitely the first to markets, where we were first to do this and first to do that. But I don't ever want to diminish brands that really want to be at that next level. You had Nike coming out years ago saying that they're a technology company. And if you think about the ability in terms of a very minor budget to make a splash or noise about this, whether it's installation based, we're going to do this in 1 or 2 stores or 1 or 2 trade shows, whether it's we're going to actually be the first brand in the metaverse and we can all eye roll about things like that. But for a lot of brands, it really is a distinction and positioning within their own industry that they are innovative, forward-thinking, disruptive, willing to take chances, willing to take risks. And there is that, going back to the first topic here, but there's a PR component and value to that often does translate very powerfully to Wall Street. Whether it was an effective campaign in terms of bringing on new customers and bottom line sales seems somewhat irrelevant. We saw the airlines do this magically. There are certain airlines, Delta being one of them, that really positioned themselves in a way that wasn't necessarily true, besides some bit of makeup or lipstick on the proverbial pig, but ultimately made them be seen as innovators. We're the first of iPads on there, free Wi-Fi, whatever it was. So I don't want to diminish that huge component of what brands need today to move the needle, which might, for many of them, be more public-based or Wall Street-based or investor-based or perception-based than actual customer movement off of whether someone did something in this immersive experience.
Well, let's follow this up with one last question. I'm going to go to Saul on this. I mean, is it better, given all that we've just heard from both Liz and from Mitch, I mean, is it better to embrace early or to come in strong with the right execution at your own pace? And I'm thinking about Apple in particular, who's never first to market, but always best to market. Is that a better way to go?
I think you have to play to your competencies, because you look at Microsoft was really, really late getting into the market with the Zune, and they missed the window and didn't create a better product. So it really, there is no stock answer. Is it better to go in early or late? You go in when you can develop something that people actually care about. That's where I always stand.
Well, I want to move on and talk about a really interesting story regarding the NSA and the CIA. We just found out that both of them, the NSA and the National Security Administration and the Central Intelligence Agency, have instituted agency-wide usage of ad blocker mandates because ads are far too dangerous to allow in the buildings. So, Matt, if ads are that dangerous to them, what does this mean for the rest of us? And what do we do as an industry to kind of, well, I mean, I guess we've been asking this question for years now, but what do we do to effectively change the perception of our industry as being bad for consumers?
Yeah, I mean, there are implications of ad blockers on us. I mean, you know, the latest stats I saw last year or this year were almost 30% of American internet users block ads, and worldwide it's much higher. It's like 42%. The thing is that when you look at the reasons why people block, the reasons are not national security. I mean, all the top reasons are around it's too many ads, or it's annoying, or ads are intrusive, and all the viruses and all the other things come in down, you know, lower as reasons. So it is a real issue. I think articles like this will exacerbate the problem, right? That will increase it too. But I think there's plenty that brands can do. I mean, first of all, you can embrace this, basically engage people around it. That's what a lot of people say to do, is that, you know, some people don't even realize they have ad blockers on, right? So you might ask them to allow your brand, but like block the other people, right? Or you might get rid of the problems you're having. Maybe you really are slowing down performance on the pages. Maybe you really are doing kind of annoying ads, and you should stop doing that too. So there's things you can do as a marketer. But I think it also points out the limitations of things like display, which are not dead by any means, but is increasingly a smaller format. So you've got to have more opt-in marketing. You've got to have more content marketing. You see the rise of out-of-home that really is, you know, obviously gets around ad blockers and things like that too. And then you've got other kinds of content like video and podcast where people are kind of choosing it and they're discovering it in other ways that aren't necessarily blocked. So I think there's plenty marketers can do, but you kind of have to get into the game. You can't just ignore it.
I'd love to have sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the main concerns that I had with this article was that if the NSA and the CIA are saying that it's so dangerous with phishing and other types of malware type attacks that can come through these channels, I mean, that goes far beyond the typical reasons for people to block ads, which is they annoy me, they're in my way, they make the page load too long. I mean, it goes far beyond that. It goes right to the heart of, this is dangerous for my computer. It's dangerous for me, for my family, for my information, for my privacy. I mean, that's what this announcement says to me. And
you're right. I mean, marketers can put, you know, data security more in place. They can be tougher on the platforms through which they use to demand more things in place. And I think we're seeing people do that. I think we're seeing marketers do that with the platforms. But I think they're already doing that. Maybe this will accelerate it.
I think we're being a little gentle here, and I'm maybe happy to be rid of the agency life for myself, and maybe I'll speak more freely. But why wouldn't we all want to strengthen our data protection? One, exactly what Bob is saying. You would think that this move might trigger everyone to say, I'm blocking ads. Even if there's a slight risk, why bother? We're not talking about content, things I am aiming for. We're talking about the ads. Why do the ads need to track me so? Do I really want these ads in the first place? Why should data, you know, even after an ad has been shown to me, even be allowed to be shared or seen? These are really fundamental questions that we allowed to get away from us over, for me at least, being 20 years in this business and then not being in the business. But when I see an article like this, to me, it's everything wrong with the argument of why anybody would allow a site, let alone an ad, to track them. This, hey, we're going to give you better ads. They're going to be more relevant. They're going to be, I'm just not there anymore. And I think this tracking and this perversion of our data and then creating malware or potential security risks within our entire infrastructure is a really, it's a real problem for the industry, that if this gets any sort of volume in a very noisy world, I think there are going to be bigger problems in whether or not they should be buying some 3D ads somewhere.
And this is coming from a guy we're not talking about Bob Hoffman saying this. We're talking about Mitch Joel, who's a digital guy, saying this, which is kind of has a lot of import. But go ahead, Saul, you were going to say.
I agree with a lot of what other people said, you know, but because the ad was so specific about these two agencies, and, you know, everybody knows the NSA stands for no such ads. But the thing that I, you know, thought was interesting that nobody has brought up on at least this discussion, it wasn't part of the articles, but it's like just ads are also by nature disruptive. And if people are trying to keep the world safe and be all Jack Ryan like they shouldn't get trapped down a rabbit hole of like Fashion Nova ads and stuff like that. And I'm just surprised nobody picked up on that. Like, yes, the safety and yes, all that stuff, I agree. But also like the role of an ad is to make you forget about what you were doing. So I'm surprised they've even allowed ads for the last 20 years.
Well, I want to move on to our last topic and deal with that because the UK Advertising Administration Authority, Advertising Standards Authority, I was going to get that wrong no matter what. The UK's Advertising Standards Authority has issued new guidance for pay-to-play games. Now, what that means is, your typical game that allows you to come in and get a loot box to advance levels or buy gems, etc. Any game that only allows you to buy those items rather than to earn them in some way, some shape or form in the game, are now going to have to be a little bit more explicit about what's going on and have stricter guidelines put on them. So, Mitch, is the guidance fair? What are the implications? And how soon will we see similar guidance show up from around the world? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, one, we need people to understand who are listening to this, that this isn't a law or a rule. This is nothing that can be enforced or fined. It's merely a recommendation by this group, similar to probably something we have here in North America with the IAB. So just understand that from that perspective. There's lots of nuances and complexities that have come out in this call. And obviously, living in Canada, we see how much closer we might be to European privacy and issues around digital than there is in, let's say, a country like America. So it's really, really different there. And then when you read it and you dig into this sort of sketchy world of ad formats and push to downloads and all this stuff that we all hate on our apps when any app isn't something you paid for, it really makes you wonder, what would it look and feel like? Like, if you're asking me, can you just make the X bigger, always in the left, and kill the whole timer business, right? Like that in and of itself would be something that might become an ad or industry standard that might change the game from the way they're doing it, which is hiding the X, having there be a timer in a weird place so your eyes and jaws. I mean, there's a lot of sketchy tactics here that, fundamentally follow the spam rule. It push it on everybody with the hopes that it works for the small few. And within the article, by the way, there was a great video that, again, Bob, I hope you'll link to it. If not, I'll definitely be linking to it when I share this episode of the BeanCast. But it's by this YouTube channel called Saberspark that's got millions of followers. But the video is called The Disgusting State of Mobile Game Ads. And it really breaks down in terms of how corrosive the industry is, but also the revenue side of it. The upside is just so big. These mobile apps are usually or games are usually pretty crappy, very easy and fast to develop, and they're generating 3, 4, sometimes 5 times the revenue than Avengers Endgame did, which was one of the greatest, Hollywood hauls of all time. So when the money's that serious and you can leverage spam-like tactics, 1 and 1 equals 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8, and that's where you have this issue. So to me, it's not about where is this in the freemium, in the click to download and the pay per download models and all the things we see. But it's really, really problematic when you look at, one, the content, the games they're pushing, the lack of real consideration that a lot of these publishers are putting on who's running the ads. They just go, oh, mobile game, and that's okay. When a lot of the time the content is the type of stuff that if it were in a standard YouTube video, it would get shut down or demonetized. So there's a lot of things happening here. I like the general assignment of this. I just wish it was more IAB-like when they came out and said, these are going to be the standards, sizes, file size, how it's going to work, where it needs to reside on a server, so that it becomes more transparent and better for the user experience. None of this is around driving a great user experience to get to a great game. These are fundamentally predatory tactics.
Forgive me if I misunderstood this. The Advertising Standards Authority is more like the FCC, right? I mean, it's not a.
Oh, I don't know.
It's more like a regulation type organization that can make recommendations for legal action, as opposed to being able to prosecute people or make laws or stuff like that. So, I mean, it's less like the IAB and more like a standards authority that can issue guidance. But I'm not entirely sure either. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can speak authoritatively on this.
I don't think that whether they can or can't empowers or emblazons the argument more or less. The problem is you have a real predatory market in something that's easy to produce and something that is truly, pun intended, gaming a system that is ultimately a really bad customer experience. And again, the big platforms, YouTube being one of the bigger ones, according to this article, they just don't care because it's so much revenue for them.
Liz, I'd love to get your thoughts on this aspect of things, because when we're talking about in-game advertising, the large majority of it is just other games, whether it's the same game manufacturer or game developer who's coming out with other games. But I'm seeing more and more ads show up into those type of platforms from like money applications and other types of services that are geared toward home ownership or so I mean, it's obviously being experimented with a lot. Do we bring the standards with us and make sure that they're implemented, or is this something that is still the Wild West across the board, and we really do need somebody to step in from the government and start setting standards in the United States, in Canada, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the word predatory is the perfect word to describe what's happening here. And it's funny, too, that you asked in relation to some of the financial offerings that they have here, because it just reminds me of predatory lending with the banks, only, it's in a gaming situation and it's in an entertainment type of, experience for the consumers. So I feel like it in a way that's even worse that they're mixing, actual financial decisions that, are rational with something that is a complete dopamine rush in relation to gaming. So I think, it's about defining standards. I think it's about having transparency to the audience who perhaps is by no means aware of the total cost. I mean, because if you think of, even who's playing and buying some of these, I mean, shoot, or I'm assuming in some instances, knowing how much my kids spend time, on some of these gaming and these types of executions, it's like, what are we doing? Or we're totally taking advantage of some of these consumers. So anyway.
Yeah, it's like, what's worse, Liz? Are we going to be predatory to children or financially illiterate people? Like, it's the worst.
Well, I mean,
it's just,
we're
pick your evil.
We're all talking about advertising, and this particular standard that was set forward, these guidance that was put forward has to do with loot boxes and the kind of pay to play type scenarios that's inherent in these games. I mean, you got it coming and going. It's not just the ads that are questionable and the way the ads are being implemented being problematic. It's also the fact that the games themselves are designed to make money. I mean, it's just like, I won't name names, but I know a specific game that's making several $1 million a week, in revenue from just selling loot boxes and selling.
Right, but the loot box issue, which is one that, again, if you've worked at all in the gaming industry, that is a core gambling-like component. And so if you think about in the relation to, do we want to be basically incentivizing kids with gambling-like behavior? Then you start even getting into the worst of the worst here. And that's really what they're bringing to light as well, is that loot boxes by their nature are gambling-like, and the intended target for this is kids.
And they're not even saying loot boxes are bad with this guidance. They're just saying that you need to provide a pathway toward being able to play the game and be able to get these rewards naturally through playing. It may be harder, it may be slower, but you can do it. You don't need to pay money. So they're not even banning this. I think the problem is that so many game manufacturers and game developers are starting to, really skirt the line and go for the money no matter what, instead of having any kind of ethical treatment to their product.
And it sounds like they'll be more careful about like the communication too. Like I thought in the article when they said they might have to cut back on, what was it, like best value exclamation point and best offer. So I'm in support of anything that cuts out exclamation points. So that is a good thing for the consumer, I think.
I've been seeing more and more of that in the marketing that I've been doing. So interesting. Well, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Mr. Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the home of the Idea Integration Company, the word-of-mouth agency that he runs. Tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What would you like to promote?
So, Bob, excuse me, I'm all about honesty. So I can admit my phone doesn't ring off the hook with inbound inquiries, but I'm busy because I hustle and I do great work. Well, my phone did ring this past Friday, and chatted with this gentleman for a bit. And when I asked how he heard about me, he gave me a previous client's name, and this is what the client said about me. And I'd like to share my testimonial. He said, marketing stunts are like abortions. If you need them, you don't want to do them yourself. That's why you better call Saul. A little bit weird, but
that is a very weird recommendation.
Testimonial? Was that?
I don't know, but it was memorable. So I'm throwing this out here. If you need some help getting some qualified attention for your company, drop me a note at theideaintegration.com or give me a call at toll free at 888-489-7285. And yes, that is 888-489-SAUL. And as I've said the last couple of weeks, we are really busy right now, but we do have a window for one project opening up October 1st. So hopefully we could fill it with someone who's a faithful listener to the BeanCast.
That comment is so worthy of Norm Macdonald, and I know that's the highest compliment I can pay for you. So hopefully you'll get some work from that. Now, next up, we have Liz Mare. You can find her at thepartneringgroup.com. That's the home of the Partnering Group, where she is a partner and a consultant. So tell us what's going on in your world, Liz. What would you like to promote?
Oh, geez. Well, I think essentially, the shameless plug that's related to our topic earlier is nearly every retailer is increasing their capabilities on media and ultimately leveraging and monetizing their data. And this is coming at a very high price to a lot of CPGs. And we're actually anticipating retailer media network and their advertising efforts to grow into about a $40 billion industry by 2024. So we talked a lot about media fragmentation earlier, and I know CPGs are struggling with this just because retailers are continuing demand investments are made. And so winning the digital shelf, standing out with your consumers and just the agility required to plan, execute, and optimize in this commerce environment can be challenging. So give me a call. The Partnering Group is actually based with practitioner experience. So the team that represents our commerce and digital commerce practices is incredible. They have deep experience from roles on the retailer side to the brand and agency side. So give me a call or an email at lmayer@tpgmail.com and let's talk.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by this move you made. It sounds so exciting and so dynamic. So if anybody's interested, definitely give Liz a call. Next up, we have Mitch Joel. You can find him at 6pixels.com. That's the home of the 6 Pixels group, where he has his podcasts and his consultancy and his speaking engagements, his books. There's so much stuff going on over there. So what's going on in your world, Mitch? What would you like to promote?
I appreciate that. There is no consultancy. There's a podcast. There's some writing.
I know. I always want to give you a
sharing.
consultancy role, but you're not.
But yeah, I appreciate that, Bob. I'll share two things. One is a dear friend and brilliant thinker, Susan Cain, who some might know from the book Quiet, all about the power of introverts, is about to launch her brand new book called Bittersweet. So I will recommend that people run out and pre-order it now, so you make sure you get it as soon as it does drop, because it's going to be an incredible lateral way for business people to think differently about their work. And aligned with that, I'll also recommend another podcast. Check out Debbie Millman and her Design Matters show. It's incredible. She's got a brand new season coming out. Some great guests, very diverse guests. And again, this all piles into my idea that your best ideas won't come from reading about your industry. They're going to come from hearing other very smart people from very different backgrounds and industries think differently. So check out Susan Cain, Bittersweet, and check out Design Matters, Debbie Millman's podcast.
Thank you for the recommendations. That sounds great. Last but not least, we have Mat Zucker. You can find him at Prophet.com. That's Prophet, the person with the seeing eyeball or the crystal ball, as opposed to Prophet. Not the
silent H.
But he's a senior partner there, co-leads the global marketing group. He is also an author. He has several books out. He has a podcast, a couple podcasts that he's doing. So tell us what's going on in your world, Matt. What would you like to promote?
Thanks, Bob. Well, since we spoke last when I was on the show, I released the audiobook of Bronze Seek Silver, Lessons from a Creative Career in Marketing. And I recorded my local radio station. And I think you know I got my start in radio advertising, writing copy for radio ads. So it was like super fun to record in a professional environment, but also do it in a radio station. So that's out, on Audible and everything. And then, for an exclamation point to it, if anyone is, too cheap to pay for it, I would love some reviews. So just send me a message and I'll give you some promo codes to listen to the book if you would do a review with an exclamation. I don't think the UK ASA would allow that, but we're not there, so I think it'll pass.
Yeah, I love this book. It was a lot of fun to read, and you should definitely get a chance. If you get a chance to get the audiobook, definitely go for it. A lot of fun. Last but not least, it's me. And for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive, find out how to consult with me, and of course you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, I've been on this kick of doing 2 fairs the past couple of weeks, so you guys can comment on either of these, but Busch Beer's tree work really tickled my fancy. I mean, right down to they used WeWork's font to create this logo for Tree Work, which is basically a co-working space out in the middle of nowhere with a trailer and basically a whole bunch of picnic tables and places to work out in the open. It's perfect for COVID. I loved it. But I was also pretty amazed and really kind of loved this amazing reverse psychology of the Wilmore Funeral Home ads from a pro-vaccine group. They basically went around saying, don't get the vaccine on these billboard trucks, and the catch line is that they're a funeral home. I thought this was really powerful. Comment away, Saul. What's your thoughts on either of these?
So the tree work, it speaks a lot to what we've talked about a couple of times today. It was really smart because it's high PR, it's low touch execution. By low touch, I mean how many people can actually be pushed through this thing. So the reality is they're going to build a huge email list of people who want to be there, create some great content, generate 2 or 3 news cycles, and win an award or 2. So 2 thumbs up on the tree work. And as for the funeral home, man, I posted about this on LinkedIn. I talked about how brilliant it was, and like 21,000 people saw my post and lots of engagement, lots of comments, except for 2 people who hated it, just really thought it was awful. And they came up with how does this affect the bottom line? How do you measure this? This is how companies burn budget. And man, I got to tell you, burning it down to its simplest thing, it was probably less than a $5,000 spend. It was a local business buying a local billboard, and the zillions of impressions and the 30 minutes of CNN time was just icing. This is why you do these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought both of these campaigns were really, really smart campaigns. Well, I'm not as excited about the fail this week. Matt, Fox News accepts Mike Lindell and his MyPillow ads back into the fold. Basically, the MyPillow ads are going to be running on Fox News again, despite the fact that this crazy man has been going around spreading all kinds of lies and all kinds of conspiracy and is just not very smart right now. I'm not sure why, besides the bottom line, they're accepting his ads anymore. And even that, I mean, how much money can this guy possibly be spending selling pillows? I mean, it's just he can't be one of their major advertisers. I'm not. What's your thoughts on this?
Some people just find each other, some great loves just, I don't know why they did this. They were, Fox, every now and then they do something really, really good and they do the right thing. And then they don't. And then it's just a bad lesson to everyone around. It's just bad role modeling around taking anyone's money, everyone has a right to advertise, right? But like, you don't have to take his money, but you did, I guess. And it's just gross because you want to keep believing in all the media, and it just kind of drives me crazy. I'll be curious which shows it shows up on. Did it say?
It, as far as I know, it did not. I didn't.
It could just be buried on Tucker, or something.
It does speak to just the general, and I'm speaking as a Canadian here, the general politicization of everything. Because what does it say if they don't accept the money? Right. But what does it say if they do? And that's the real wonder of this. And again, going back to our first topic, PR.
Yep, absolutely.
But also, it's an amazing case study for Fox News because by them taking his ads off the air, his company lost $1 million a week in sales. So they should be running out to everybody who's got a bit of a fringe kind of target base and saying, we are the place you should be spending your money.
Well, the foul of this week I'm going to give to you, Mitch, because it's just like your old home.
Do not do that.
Okay, I'll go to Liz.
I'm happy to take it. That's
thanks.
Both of you can take it. I'm just going to throw it out there. Whoever wants to take it.
I'll take it.
WPP has been levied with a $19 million fine, slap on the wrist, from the SEC over a bribery scandal that happened under Sir Martin's watch. So, I mean, the current management group knew about it and worked through it and is dealing with the government in a above board fashion. So we're not slamming WPP over it, but it is really, really pretty damning the way that this all came down. Sir Martin did not deliver any kind of feedback or any comment on this. But under his reign, a whole bunch of standards for their agency group were not adhered to for new purchases in third world and second world countries. And they were ending up with a lot of bribery scandals going on throughout the organization. So, Mitch, any thoughts on this? Any comments?
Well, let's set it up by saying that I sold my business to WPP while Martin Sorrell was there. And I can tell you from our experience that being in Canada, becoming even Sarbanes-Oxley compliant is a road and a path, especially when you're an independent agency. Now, I'm not going to sit here and condone any activity of agencies who are involved in bribery, but this is, I believe, I'm not surprised that it happened, not to WP, but in general, when you are doing the level of acquisitions that they're doing between 500 and 550 and about 100 every single year for decades and decades. You are unfortunately probably going to come across people who don't know how to run their business all that well, who have been running it in culturally different situations, let's just call it. So again, not condoning it. I'm glad that it's out on the table. I'm glad that they are fixing it and doing everything they can to fix it. But again, I didn't see anything while I was there, but I've heard tons of stories about wonky accounting practices, certain executives who are not on the up and up. And again, that's the problem of these types of massive businesses that are hoovering up other businesses.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.